Steve, let me ask you. You're a professor of complexity. What haven't we said already? We need. You can be our number 10. Eve has written more about managing complex companies pretty much than anyone else.
Well, thank you for putting me on the spot all of a sudden.
I did say, over coffee, I did say I might just do that.
No, I would add, the flip side of diversity is intensity of dialogue.
Yeah, that's
So I think, one of the ways to handle complexity for me is to move from debate to dialogue in organizations. Dialogue being the sharing of assumptions, the sharing of starting points, and the clarification of starting points, rather than the sharing of ending points. So it's not a question of making proposals and having your proposals turned down or accepted. It's a question of creating the quality of dialogue internally, which does capitalize on what you were saying, meaning the richness of diversity across cultures, contexts, and so on. I would also argue that on this issue of diversity, you have different types of businesses. Some are more global, some are more, in a way, sensitive to local differences, where I think was the place you very interestingly started saying it's both. And I think you made the same point with TCS an hour ago. So I think it's also very interesting when you look at when it's both, dialogue becomes even more important in a sense.
Yeah.
So if I had to add 1/10, I would put dialogue.
That would be dialogue. And those companies, Eve, who have done it well, what sort of things have they done, do you think, to build dialogue? I'm not going to let him off.
Well, first of all, it's a culture of taking the time.
Taking the time.
And not seeing it as wasted time to go back and say, okay, let's share assumptions. Let's share perceptions. Let's share emerging ideas and so on. It's also therefore a question of taking the risk and being willing to share ideas rather than just share packaged proposals, if you wish, or communicate packaged proposals.
Yeah.
I think also what I've observed is using the right language, meaning not being too, I think the danger with complexity in a way is you can go very quickly into some very abstract metaphorical discussions which don't lead anywhere, or you can remain very much perhaps too close to the technical or the local ground. So it's finding the right level between abstraction and being very rooted in the local context or in the functional language or in the specialist's language, if you wish, because then you cannot have a dialogue. People will just talk past each other, even with the best of all intentions. So I think it's this question of building the space, finding the time, de-risking the process of sharing, building the right language, being very willing on the part of senior executives or of CEOs to basically go into a process which has sometimes been called adaptive leadership, which is essentially saying, this is new to us, I don't know any better than you do, folks, and basically turning the problem back to the organization and saying, how do we mobilize all the brains within the system, or as many brains within the system as we can, and therefore to have a very open process, and to extend this dialogue as widely as we can. I think these are a few simple ideas around this.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. And I just wanted, just before I open up the conversation, just to contrast, two companies. I wrote a case about Nokia, and I also wrote a case about BP and Royal Bank of Scotland, which makes you think you should never ask me to write a case about your company. But we've been reflecting on Royal Bank of Scotland, and Andrew, who's sitting, Hill and I, who are on the, he's looking really nervous now as well. We sit on the judging panel of the FT Business Book of the Year, and one of the books we've shortlisted, which will be announced on Monday, what the winning book is a book about Royal Bank of Scotland. And Fred Goodwin, one of the interesting things about Fred, and in fact, when I wrote the case 15 years ago, I said what a marvelous thing it was, is he had a morning meeting where he met, Fred Goodwin was the CEO of Royal Bank of Scotland, he met all his senior team for 1 hour every single morning. And I was contrasting that because I was talking to Chandra. I'm writing something on TCS. I think you're already realizing what a big mistake that is. And you meet all of your direct reports for 2 days every month, don't you?
Yes, we do.
In a very informal conversation. And what came out of the RBS book is that the Fred's conversation was really about him telling them what he wanted them to do that day, literally that day, whereas yours seems to be more of a, what Eve would call a dialogue. So I just wanted to reflect on that, because I think it's a really important point. Okay, and thank you, Eve, for that. We're up to our 10, but I know we've got a lot more to go. Can I open it up to the whole group now? Questions, observations, if you've got any to add to your 10, you know, although blogs are best with the 10 best things, we're happy to move past 10. I'm going to start with, there they are, I was going to say, I'm going to start with our Gen Y, and they've already got their hands up. Is this a question, an observation? What is it? It is a question. Good.
My name is John. I'm from Colombia. This question is directed mainly towards Mr. Goings. It's basically 3 questions. So
let's just have one question.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm trying to decide which one. So I was very impressed because I think your company includes many of the elements and values that I consider very important for a corporation to move forward, like empowerment of the workforce, diversity, all of this. But my question, because we're talking about meaning, significance, purpose, to encourage a workforce to be more productive, to be with the company for a long time, to develop its full potential. How did a food storage, plastic containers company, which is not only limited to that, also to beauty brands, go from that to let's say creating this meaning that you want to show your workforce, because maybe other businesses can learn how to design the meaning that they want to push forward.
Yeah, so a great question, because when you talk about meaning, it's so easy in some companies to talk about meaning because they're saving people's lives through pharmaceuticals or connecting people through mobile phones, but yours is plastic containers. And yet you've built one of the world's most meaningful companies. Good question, how do you do it?
Authenticity is the key, and how we groom people as they come through the organization. They learn that it's real. It is interesting, when we do an exit analysis with someone who has been with us, even somebody in the sales organization, 25 years, she often said she came into the business for economic reasons, but she stayed for relationships and recognition. And so when there's a funeral, there are hundreds, but they were the ones that were part of the family she developed there, these covenantal relationships. There's, you know, in spite of, and you find it mostly in the big cities, how lonesome people really are.
Yeah.
And they get, it's interesting, they started calling it at Davos, the Tupperware effect, that we microfinance her, and that's why I'm waiting for that Nobel Prize, because he only just gave him the money. We microfinance, we give her free training, we then give her a success coach to, when she trips, stumbles, and falls, there's somebody there that said, oh, that happened to me too. And she goes out and she tastes success. When she tastes success, she feels confident. When she feels confident, she has influence. Yeah. And then that's why we find, if you do an analysis of United Nations programs, so many of the outside-in programs, airlifts in, don't work. But if you make an investment in a woman and do it inside out, and you give her training, and she builds her confidence, things change. That's why it's so strange, the nearsightedness of the Taliban. Don't train or educate women. Okay. Who's going to raise the children then? Who's going to educate them? Then, I mean, that'll last about one cycle. And it just doesn't work. So and I find it translates very interesting. You would think, well, wait, this is only a story and a leverageable business model for emerging markets of the world, where you have a couple things in our favor. Less than 30% of the women have a job outside the home, and not much of a retail infrastructure. But I was at a meeting here in Vienna, Susan and I, with our top distributors here, and they all started as demonstrators many years ago. It's the same for them, and it's the same in Norway, where the per capita income's north of 40,000 a year. People are looking for the same thing. Feeling of self-worth, personal development, and then they want to give it back. So it is interesting. Fred Smith once said to me, when we were kidding about him starting Fed Express, he said, "Rick, the best way to look smart is find a good parade and get in front of it." That's what happened to me here.
Thank you so much. And I guess in a way that takes us back to the conversation that we had with Charles Handy this morning, really, because you remember Charles also moved it from talking about complexity at the level of the organization right down to an individual life and how somebody decides to live their lives on a moment-to-moment basis. So thank you so much, Rick, for sharing that. Next question, please. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Daniel Serra. I'm from the Barcelona School of Management. We talked about people, relationships, but I would be interested to know what about what some people say that helps complexity, which are the technologies such as data mining, business analytics, big data. To what extent they are helping us to understand complexity? Is it really becoming so important within the decision-making process, or these are only another set of tools that we are learning and that we hope in the future will help us take decisions on complexity?
Thank you. I guess that Chandra and Clas are the two who want most likely to, because both of you mentioned big data in your... Chandra, do you want to spot? And then Clas, yeah.
I think the insights-driven world is real. It's for real. Because today it's all about consumers, and everybody, every business is wanting to know about the consumer. Even B2B businesses eventually wants to know about the consumer and the behavior of the consumer and who the consumer is influencing, in what kind of a community in which the consumer is connected. So much data is available today. And so the world will move from analytics to predictive analytics to anticipative analytics. And all these three phases are for real. And that's because the data was always there. In some form it was happening, but now with all this connectedness, there is a lot of digital footprint of the data, both structured and unstructured, which is available somewhere, and you are able to collect all this. And when you are, I'll give you a simple example. If you are a runner and if you're part of a community in Facebook, and then you even talk about which shoe I bought. Let's say I go back and then say that I bought A6 this shoe. Immediately, all the people who are connected immediately ask the impression about that, about how I find this new shoe. And immediately, that information is available to do a direct marketing to all the other people. And it is happening. It's really happening. In some businesses, it's real already.
Clas, do you want to add anything to
maybe
that?
I add a few remarks just to get an idea about the amount of data, and a few of you may have wondered this morning when Don Tapscott was actually talking about knowledge networks and had this galaxyzoo.org homepage here, right? And what this is about, right? It's about that you could become part of actually classifying galaxies, stars, and so on. And why would somebody be interested in this? Is obvious. There's so much data out there. Today's telescope, which is used for the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, had actually collected, when it was created in the year 2000 and started looking into the sky, more data in a few weeks than the whole history of astronomics had actually developed in the century before. And when they put the next telescope there in Chile in 2016, this will actually in just 5 days collect more data about our galaxy than everything we had before till 2016, right? So again, of course, then we need the human networks again to make sense out of this. And then, of course, is when these things like galaxyzoo.org would come in. So this has a very high relevance, actually, because we just don't have enough people in NASA or other organizations to do this, right? And that's just maybe just an excursus to the amount of data which is there, but in business, it is, of course, exactly the same thing. And we try to give complete new kind of applications to deal with that data. Like take China, one of our customers, for example, Nongfu Spring, sells like 1 billion bottles of water every day, right? And so far in the past, once a month, they try to optimize the route of their trucks across China. They have like 25,000 trucks they run across China to all these retail stores. Now, this took 3 days to do. So they started on a Friday until Monday morning of the next month. They were done, right? Now, with new data mining technology, super fast databases like ours, they are now able to do this within just 5 minutes, right? Which took just 3 days before. So you see that new technology, of course, opens, and now they can do it actually every day. Right? And that is the new application. So they can every day optimize every driver where he has to go. And that, of course, saves them a lot of fuel, energy, time, and makes their business in the end more profitable. So I would definitely say this is much more than just another kind of tool. We've really reached an era where we have to rethink many of the business processes, and we can do much more with the technology which is available today to us to make more sense out of it.
Okay, thank you so much. Next question, yeah.
Walter Dietlow, OSB Consulting from Vienna. Your last two examples just brought to my mind that one of the possibilities to deal with complexity are slack resources. The resources that you are not bound by the operative daily work. So what is your stand about being CEOs or CIOs concerning having slack resources within a company? Because the first thought, now that you don't need 3 days, but only 5 minutes, of course, is you can either take some people out or use them differently, but you most probably won't keep them in your company, or will you?
So that's actually a really interesting question, isn't it? That as you increase levels of productivity, what do you do with this time that you've got left? And do you do what some innovative companies do and use that as slack time where people can do other things? Or do you simply, you know, just pile it all back up again? Any thoughts about that?
So I think, you know, I was talking to one of the very senior executives of an American company recently. He came to me and then he said, you know, last weekend I was having a chat with my son on what he was going to do. Then he was asking for my advice. I thought about it, and then this guy said, I said to my son, whatever you do, build a business card and then say data scientist. You will have a job. So I think there's so much of data that's going to be available, and getting insights is going to be a huge skill. Yes, you can have the best of tools, but still you've got to make sense out of those output that's coming from those tools. So this is a new discipline.
So the question that he asked was about slack time. So he said, if it means that something used to take 10 hours now takes 1 hour, what do you do with the 9 hours? That was a question, I think, wasn't it? The slack time question. And the reason I think there's something behind this question, isn't it? That there is an argument for those. The theorists are all that slack time is important in complex systems because it allows.
It could be number 11 to have slack resources in an organization.
Should we make that? Well, I've actually got data as number 11, so I'm going to make that number 12. Do you want to, those of us who are keen on, do you want to just say something about the theory? Let's have a little theoretical conversation about slack resources. Do you want to start?
Well, the easy point is that if you acknowledge that you cannot pre-know the future, you very often people predict it correctly, but that's more by chance than by real knowledge. So you can't know it in advance. Then one way to deal with complexity is to have some resources left to deal with the things you don't expect. Yeah. And that would be very simple Slack resources, because if there is nobody there, a fire guard is sitting around most of the time and only active in the happening when the fire breaks out.
Yeah, we've got two people who want. Do you want to say more about this conversation? It's a different question. No, let's stick with. Is yours a Slack resource thing? Okay.
Just a moment. Strategy in business has borrowed much from the military. One absolute principle in military strategy is always have a strategic reserve.
Yeah.
What have we done with this in business? The one thing you have, yes, people talk about a cash coffer or something like that. What about our people coffer? What about our people strategic reserve? Where are there companies which have strategic reserves of people?
Mikko, do you want to say something about this? Yeah.
Maybe about the Slack resources. I mean, I think it was John this morning that mentioned about the scalability of efficiency and scalability of learning. I think this relates very close to that question. I mean, are you kind of driven only by efficiency, or is there room for learning? And we know from innovation theories that Slack resources and tensions and overlaps creates kind of dialogue, spaces for new dialogue and creation of something new. Now, if we kind of take all that out, we are only driven by efficiency. I guess that at least was what I understood with the Slack resources here.
Yeah, thank you. So that's a very strong number 12. We have just a few more minutes, but thank you for that. Is this a different question? Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to connect back to some of the conversations we were having this morning. That actually one of the real challenges of working in complexity is that you need a degree of humility. You need a degree of humility, because you don't always know what the answer is. And I'd just like to ask the panel, how does that sit with your positions as leaders of organizations?
Humility.
Humility, yeah.
Can't have authenticity without humility. Really, it's such an important role. It's interesting. We were judging. I've been deeply involved, as my wife has, with an organization called Boys and Girls Clubs of America. We take care of about 4 million young people per year who are disadvantaged. They spend hours every day there, and we sponsor a thing called Youth of the Year. Last week we were judging some of the Youth of the Year, and they make presentations, and they had made the mistake, the Atlanta Boys and Girls Club, of bringing in acting coaches to teach the speakers, the boys particularly. They came across as cocky politicians, and with no humility, and that's where Susan and I looked at each other, and we said, thank goodness the girl who won it talked from her heart, and you really wanted to support her. Needs to happen more in leadership.
I think it's one of the most fundamental values that's required for any company to be successful. Humility, and at the same time, compassion. Humility and compassion both are so fundamental, without which I don't think that you can build any successful business. We, even in our leadership, team building meetings, when we are trying to charge people up, we always say, we want to be audacious, but not arrogant. We want to be aspirational, but not abrasive. So these are things are extremely important. We always believe that we are building a humble company with a lot of hunger. These are very, very fundamental. You see any successful company, and any company which kind of falters, I think the first time you can see signs of people missing this value, or arrogance, or overconfidence, then you know, then you're going to miss the bus. So this is a most important value.
Lynda, could I add to that, though, because I think you're getting at something. The world is becoming more Eastern philosophically, younger people. This model of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where in the bottom it was survival, food, clothing, and shelter. I'm noticing more people I work with when in their 20s and early 30s, sure, they want to live in a decent place and have food and clothing, have basic survival, but they jump so quickly to make the world a better place and more willing to invest in those kinds of things. That those are one of the things that I think it's gratifying, because it's not a course they're teaching at most of the graduate business schools. Most of the graduate business schools, why many are in trouble and enrollments are down, they're still teaching them mostly finance, how to go to New York, be an investment banker, and make a lot of money. And you look at the courses that they're teaching, it's, and I've been on the board of one for years. The good news is I'm starting to see change there, because they're starting to go get these kind of education in other places because they can't get it there.
We could go on forever, but Richard is looking at me in a way that makes me think he wants to do something like bring it to a close. Hello? Richard has one final point.
One additional point about you have 12 now, right?
I'm up to 12, yeah. No, actually, I've got 13.
I have a tough one.
I've added humility.
I have a tough one which will take long to discuss.
That's no, we don't mind at all not having cocktails, do we?
I just would like to put it down.
Yeah.
The point is, in complexity, forget traditional business cases. And that will be really tough for many corporations to do. Yeah. Because the traditional business case assumes predictability, which you don't have anymore. And we discussed that yesterday. And I think if we want to be serious about the issues that we are facing, then corporations need seriously to think about dropping the traditional way they do business cases for investments, for innovation, whatever. But I know this would be a long debate, but maybe you can take it as
a new mindset.
Number 13.
Thank you so much, Richard. Well, our time is up, and so on behalf of all of us here, I'd like to thank.
Could we have one final question? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Who is that?
On the top, from Gen Y.
Do you know, usually, as you know, I'm usually a bit of a stickler for process and timing. But you could ask one question.
It's connected to the last comment that was just made by Mr. Curran. Okay, so my name is Karen Wooden, and I'm a Drucker Challenge winner. I'm Mexican, went to school in New York, and I live in India. And I completely resonate with what you just said about people in their 20s looking for impact. And I wanted to ask the four of you how your companies, big corporations, are dealing with this change. So there is a perception, and it's a stereotype, but there's a perception among my generation that big companies are stuffy, fixed in their ways, and not the most exciting places to work at. Because the values, and I think this relates to your work, Lynda, in the shift of work. The values of our generation are rapid learning, growth, getting your hands dirty, and the perception is that if you're in a corporation, well, you got to work, put in the hours, maybe 5-7 years until you get a little bit of growth. So obviously I'm stereotyping, but I wanted to know what your companies are doing to attract and retain young talent and to deal with this shift in values to make your companies attractive.
So in our case, we have a huge Gen Y. So Gen Y outnumbers, your generation outnumbers my generation in my company already. By a significant percentage. What we basically started doing is, me and my generation, and there are people who are probably a little more gray-haired than I am in my company, we all told ourselves that we have got to behave like Gen Ys. So how do we change the systems? How do we change our learning systems? How do we change our processes in order that we behave like Gen Ys? Because that's the future. So that's what we are going through.
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. We have done it maybe even a step further in India and other countries where we have as well, where I'm the oldest employee by far. I've always been in Bangalore, our oldest employee. We have actually asked our young colleagues to rewrite all our policies, right? That means all the HR policies, the way we deal with people, whatever we do, it's actually written by employee committees. It then comes only to the management, and we say, okay, if we can kind of finance this still, but meanwhile everybody knows what is maybe a little realistic and what is too far, but then we just do it. And by this we have been transforming specifically those companies where we have a lot of younger employees in a great way. So this is one approach we took.
Thank you. Thanks. Any other?
I would only say from the standpoint of our company, we are very deliberate about searching for young, new talent right out of school that brings energy and ideas. We put them into roles where they can learn our business and are mentored by folks that have been there previously, and really encourage them to move rapidly across different parts of the organization to gather skills and experience across the business rather than coming up, through one lane, and to do that while they're early in their career, so that we have a broad pool of talent from the earliest days who have a wide understanding of our business and can grow into general management jobs and have large spans of control at some point. So we're very deliberate. By the way, you should visit our offices. They're not boring. They're very exciting places to be. So, yeah.
Oh, Donna. Don, you have a point?
Hi, Don Tapscott. I just wanted to pick up this thing about a business case, because I think it's really important. We were talking about this in a smaller group yesterday, where Roger Martin was sort of basically making the argument that a lot of innovations, we try and build a business case for them in advance. And often they're ineffective, or I think in many cases they're phony. So I developed these laws about building business cases that I'd just like to share with everybody. The first I call the Disraeli Law. British parliamentarian, and in the House of Commons he said, the honourable member uses data and statistics like drunks use lampposts for support rather than illumination. And I think a lot of our business cases, we're trying to find something we can measure that somehow justifies something that deeply we think that we should be doing. A second one I would call the Bob Dylan Law, which is you don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. Because best practices from the past are not good predictors of what will work in the future, I think more and more we're going to have to go, this is more of an art than a science, and we're going to have to go with our intuition rather than trying to construct business cases. And these can be for any innovation or any important business initiative that we're making. And the other one is, I call it Don's first law of cost-benefit analysis, which is the probability of your business case succeeding is directly proportional to the degree to which senior management thought it was a good idea anyway. And so if your CEO thinks that, that, for example, the digital revolution is all about automating existing business processes to reduce costs, specifically headcount, it doesn't really matter what your business case is like around IT. It's not going to be successful. And the final one is the Will Rogers Law. Will Rogers, the American humorist, when informed that President Calvin Coolidge had died, Rogers said, "How can you tell?" I gather Rogers wasn't too swift. But how can you tell that this is going to work out? And I think that this is part of developing a sophisticated kind of culture and a sense of strategy within an organization where you're tuned into understanding innovations, finding the uniquely qualified minds outside your company to be able to discover new things and to innovate. So I think complexity is, to reinforce Richard's statement, is sort of, to exaggerate for emphasis, is moving us away from building all these business cases as we've done in the past.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, well, again, thank you very much to all our panel. We are, I know, going to now have a marvelous evening, but before we do so... We're just going to...
First of all, a big round of applause. That was a marvelous panel. Thank you very much, Lynda. Thank you to all the speakers we've seen today. It was a long day, but it is not finished. I invite you now to recharge your batteries, and we actually got in the bags. I don't know if you've seen the little power bank that we got. It doesn't work for iPhones and iPads, sorry, but for all other smartphones. So I invite you to recharge your batteries, and we'll see you at 8 o'clock at the Odeon Theatre for the gala evening. As I said before, the tuxedo is optional. One last point, I'd like to mention two people here in the room who have done a tremendous amount of work today. One is Jean-Alexis, better known as Jazz, who has been live tweeting all the quotes from the panelists all day long on the Twitter account of the Global Drucker Forum, which you by now know, it's G Drucker Forum. And also Mark Thomas here from the Grenoble School of Management, who has been live blogging. Actually, the summary of this session is already online, and if you want to read the 12 points, 13 points that Lynda made, you can shake, but they're all there, all live, so you can read them in case you missed one of them. So here's the address again, globaleduc.wordpress.com. Thank you very much. The last thing, in order to get into the gala soiree, you need your voucher. As we say in Davos, no badge, no entry. So please take your name badges to the gala soiree. Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening.